Okay, Shalom Aleichem, over is here. Asher Yashna Pahayim, Asher Ainenu Pahayim. We're going to start with the Mishnah on Chaf Hamad Aleph, where just the second half of the Mishnah that Ochlim B'Shosim Aroi Chutz L'Sukkah. This introduces the concept of there's Achilas Keva and there's Achilas Aroi. There's some types of Achila that are Chayv in a Sukkah, some types that are Pater in a Sukkah. The Gemara goes on in Chaf Vav, says Kama Achilas Aroi. How much is that? The bottom of Chaf Vav and Aleph. Amar Yosef Tartio Tlasei Bei. Our gears is 2 or 3 beitzim, which and Amalei Abaya V'Hazimnis again Sagalei Ba'Nimish B'Hachi. Many times that's enough for a person to be full. 2 or 3 beitzim, that's quite a bit of pas. Avalei Sudas Keva, that's Mamash Sudas Keva. So that can't be the amount that's Pater al Sachilas Aroi Chutz L'Sukkah. And the Rabbiya Kedetayim Bar Be'Rav Ayol L'Kalav. Just when you grab a bite and you go into the Shiur, because it might take a long time, you don't want to go in hungry, so you just grab a bite. And Rashi over here says Tartir plus Shtan Shalosh Pamim Yitan L'Tokpiv. And he says the French word morsels, which, you know, a morsel of bread, 2 or 3 morsels, like 2 or 3 bites. So Rashi clearly doesn't seem to be Goris over here, Bayin. It's just 2 or 3 bites. It's something else than Beitzim. And Tosfos points this out as well, that it says Bekuntris, Pirs Bekuntris, Shtam Shalosh Pamim, Yitan Tokpiv, morsel, Balaz. Yes, far because of him, Tartil Los Bei. So Tosfos is clearly saying that Rashi did not have our girsa of the Gemara, that there are those that have that girsa, which means Taka Beitzin. But he says Akol Echad, but the Maisa it's all one thing, because it's when a person puts in the base of Belia, what you put in your mouth, when you fill up your mouth, then the amount is a Beisa. So the 2 or 3 times really is Betzim 2 or 3 Beitzim, what Tosfos said. I thought Rashi Betzim was coming to Fuke that, but Tosfos is learning that Hainu Hach, it's really whether you're Goris or not, is not that consequential, because it really means the same thing. And the Kasha is obvious, sharp Kasha, that's 2 or 3 Beitzim is quite a bit. So, but one Beitzah, when you fill up your mouth one time, that one fill, that we consider not to be a Kedei Sviyah. Now the Gemara goes on later on, when on the following Mishnah on Chaf Vav Beis, where it says Maisa Leviul Rabbi Yochanan and Zakkai Litom as a Tavshel Rabbi Gamliel Shnei Kosvos Lichal Mayim Abu Helim L'Sukkah. There we had a Maisa that they brought these Tanoim to be toyim just to taste the Tavshel, just to eat a little bit, or to eat 2 dried dates and a pitcher of water, and they said bring it up to the Sukkah. The Gemara says 3 Chedushim and Ritzadik that him Dafka, when he ate it, Ritzadik was known as the Tzaddik, as the Chassid. He was fasting for 4 years. And even so, he ate Chutz Sukkah Dafka to teach the lesson that even a Talmid Chacham, if he wants to eat Chutz Sukkah, is not over anything. He wanted to teach that lesson that if he eats Pakas Kashir, there's no chiyuv. You're not doing the wrong thing to eat outside the Sukkah, even though there's a mila to do it, like the first Tanaim did it. That they so the Gemara asks Akasha, it's Maisa Listor. That seems to be a steer minei obey, whether you do or don't need to eat it in the Sukkah. And Maisa, they brought these Tanaim, meaning to teach us a Maisa that Allah, that you're not considered a Baal Gaiva to eat something in the Sukkah that's pater from doing it. But and then Rabbi Tzadok wanted to teach the lesson to make sure that people shouldn't be mistaken and think that's the halacha. They should know that it is it's pater. So now the Gemara Sakasha, going back to our sugya, and it says that the only thing that Rabbi Tzadok ate chutz sukkah was a pakasukkah beitza, hakabeitza boy sukkah. If it would be a kabeitza, it would be chayv in a sukkah. Limit to have it used to Rabbi Yosef v'Abaya. Rabbi Yosef and Abaya that said 2 or 3 bites, or 1 bite, which the bite they're talking about, Tosfos says is a kabeitza, and that's telling us that it's still pater. That's considered a chilas aroi chutz sukkah. Or from this Mishnah, you see from Tzaddik that if it would be a whole kabeitza, it would be chayv in sukkah. The Gemara says, Dilma Pagel Kabetza Netila Bracha Loy Boy, Akabetza Boy Netila Bracha. That the only thing there with Tzaddik was there's three Chedushim of Tzaddik, about Netil Sedayim, about benching, and about Sukkah. So the Sukkah portion with Tzaddik was would have eaten outside the Sukkah even if it was Kabetza. Just as far as Netil Sedayim and Bracha Achroina, that he held in Kedei Tzviya, which is Kabetza, that he held your Pater in Birchas Hamazon and Netil Sedayim. But in Anachanami Sukkah, even if it would have been a Kabetza, where it is Chayav and Netil Sedayim and Birchas Hamazon, still it'd be Pater in Sukkah because it's still considered an Achilas Aroi, like Rabbi Rav Yosef back in our Sugya before, that a Kabetza is still, until it's Yosef Mikabetza, it's still considered Achilas Aroi. That's the way the Tosas and Rav Shonim were learning over here. The Rambam is a little bit different. They all come out to be the halacha that it would just be the Patur is a Shiur Kabetza, and Yosef Kabetza as a Chiyuv. The Rambam is interesting exactly where he gets what he says. The Rambam says, Ochlin in Perak Vav Halacha Vav, Ochlin b'Shosen Yeshenim b'Sukkah Kol Shiva Bein B'Yom V'Layla, also Lechal Suda Kutz Sukkah Kol Shiva Elim Ken Achal Achilas Haroi, which is what Kabetza O Pachos O Yeser Ma'at. At Betza, whether it's a little less or a little bit more, it's all considered epis, like around a Betza, and it's still Patim Sukkah. So it could be that the Rambam got this. Where do you get it from? All the other Rishonim were learning that they ate the Kalu Barbe Rav and etc. Those shiurim are a shiur of Kabetza, as it says, and most Rishonim seem to go that way. But the Rambam probably learned that since the Gemara specifically did not speak out a clear shiur Kabetza, but it said those type of things like Kadachal Barbe Rav or 2 or 3 bites. So the Gemara is going out of its way not to give a clear shiur. Rambam is learning. And it's an Indian of, since it's an Indian of Teshu Kein Taduru, so it's not regular Hilchel Shiurim, I think Rambam is learning. It's a little more, a little less around a Kabetza, around that amount. That's still what people will eat outside their house. It's still not Kein Taduru, have to eat it inside the Sukkah. So the Rambam has a unique shita on that, but it makes sense from inside the Lashon of Gemara. The Gemara did not speak out a clear shiur. Like very often, it's not hard to find where the Gemara will speak out a shiur of Kabetza. So if it says such strange shiurim, like what someone grabs on the way to the shiur to eat, on the way to go learn, so something like that, it's telling us that the shiur is not a clear shiur. Now there's a chiddush over here in Rabbeinu Manoach on the Rambam, which nobody else seems to say. It's not so clear to me how he learns it from, how he's medayek it. He seems to be medayek from the Lashon Rambam, but he says, Perish. That's the Rambam says that unless you ate a achilas arah, your pater, but dafka isura hudaleka b'diavad. It's only b'diavad if you ate outside this amount of around the kabetza outside the sukkah. You're not over an iser. Aval chatchila also lechol lechem mikazayis omayla. Afilu kazayis atzmo puts the sukkah. L'chatchila it is usher to eat even a kazayis outside the sukkah. Unless you ate. In other words, he's saying that the whole Lashon Rambam is a Lashon B'diavad. Not that the Rambam didn't say Ochel chutz sukkah. He said it's also to eat a suda outside the sukkah. El in ken ochal. Here is it. El in ken ochal achilas aroi kabetza. Unless he ate. In other words, past tense that you already did it. So Lashon B'diavad. So the Rambam, he's learning in the Rambam that Lashon B'diavad is saying that Chatchila, there's an Isser, anything that has a Shir Achila by Kol Torah Kula, which would be a Kazayas, will be also L'Chatchila Chutz L'Sukkah. Zesh Shekastav Rav, and then Ken Achal. Came into boy Sukkah, boy Bracha. So Chalal, the called boy Sukkah, boy Bracha. Goes on even further to say, the Rebbeinu Manoach, that not only would you be Chatchila have to eat it in the Sukkah, once you have to eat in the sukkah, immediately you have to also make a bracha on it. So that's a tremendous chiddush. We don't find anybody else saying, and certainly all the Rishonim all clearly say not that. I mean, maybe it's not a diuk in the Rambam, but it's certainly not mentioned by anybody else or any other Rishonim. So we hold that the shiur chiyuv in the sukkah is only going to be a kabetza v'oid, and less than that, you're pater from the sukkah. If you want to eat it the sukkah, that's fine. You even get a mitzvah to do that, but you certainly don't make a bracha on it. Okay. So that's what fit the rush, the ritva, Tosfos, all the Rishonim are saying the same thing as far as that goes. Now in Shulchan Aruch, in Tafresh Lamed Tes Sit Beis, is just so some that Abba Mutter Lechol Achilas Arai Chutz L'Sukkah Become Achilas Arai Kabetza Mipas. So like the Stemus HaKol Rishonim, the Shulchan Aruch goes that way as well. That amount of Kabetza Mipas is Pater Michutz L'Sukkah. Rabbi Kiveger points out something which is very interesting, and we'll see more about this maybe a little bit later when we get to Pasa Baba Kishnin. But he says that that's true during the week, but Achilas Kazayas and Shabbos and Yom Tov, which is a Suda, when you're Yotze, you're Suda Shabbos with the Kazayas, so that becomes a Kviyas Bifnei Atzma, and therefore it would talk about Chayav Kazayas. So maybe that's shot, and we could use the Rebbeinu Minoach for a little bit. Kazayas is a Chiyuv, that's going to be Dafka when, because through that Kazayas you're Makayim a Suda Shabbos. So Kiveger himself says though that if you're already Yotze the Suda Shabbos, now you're starting to eat a kazayas. That second kazayas will be pater in the sukkah. If you're only eating a kazayas, it's only if you're coming to eat Suda Shabbos that would be the case. Which is interesting also that, it's true that the minimum chiyuv of Suda Shabbos is 3 sudas, but my understanding always was that every suda you eat on Shabbos, if you want to add more sudas, they also are considered Suda Shabbos. So they would think they would also have a din keva to them as well. Kveger says no. It's all this chiddush is saying of kazayas b'chayav on Shabbos. That's only if that's the ikar kiyum of Suda Shabbos. We'll see later on about kiddush on mazonos. Now the Mishnah Berurah says over here that the time of this halacha that a roy is mutter chutz sukkah is because the whole din of chiyuv sukkah is then teshu came to duru. And Teshuk and Taduru, people also eat small amounts, take snacks outside the house. True, your main sudas you normally eat in the house, but a snack everybody grabs outside the house. So as long as it's begetter a snack, and because I'll have to be kovea what's considered a snack as opposed to a suda, so that we're saying that it's kabetza and below. So and to eat that outside the sukkah is not a chesaron of kain Taduru, because people commonly do eat these type of things outside the house. But on the other side of the coin, it's brought down from Shlomo Zalman and Halicha Shlomo that if somebody's standing outside their house and when they want to drink a glass of water, you're right near your house, so it's a mila to, or even perhaps even a chiyuv, he says, to walk into the sukkah and drink it there, because people, if somebody's standing outside their house and they have to drink, then they'll go inside to drink. They're not going to just drink outside the house. So huadin, if you're outside the sukkah, then you're right outside the sukkah, you're going to drink a glass of water. It's one thing drinking water, on the way or whatever, but if you're just mamish outside the sukkah, then you should go into the sukkah and you're kind with that. That's a key of Teshu Kain Taduru, which Rosham Zalman learns to be that people normally do eat, even drink in their house when they're nearby, right, as opposed to drinking right outside the house. I often think about this when my sukkah is attached to my kitchen, and many times I come in, I just wanted a glass of water. So I think whether I should be toriach to go outside to the sukkah or not. But now that I saw this with Shlomo Zalman, I'll make a much bigger effort to make sure to go outside the kitchen into the sukkah to drink a glass of water. It could also be a Yerushalmi thing that we Americans often eat and drink a lot of things outside of our houses. The Yerushalmi is much more tzenu in that way. In Yerushalayim, for the old Yerushalayim, not to be seen eating anything in public, and they of course would go into the house. So maybe, and we see through the poskim here constantly that Kain Taduru is a very subjective thing. We had rise to that for the sugya. We'll talk about it later. That Kain Taduru is very subjective. It depends on what's normal for you, what's normal for or your type of people. So it could be that your Shalmis might be talking different in that way. Okay, a few more points we need to talk about. The Shulchan Aruch says that, furthermore, Mutar lishtos mayim v'yayin v'lechol perus afilu kava aleim chutz l'sukkah. You can drink water, wine, and eat perus, even if you're kaveya suda on them, chutz l'sukkah. And he doesn't even mention anybody just machmir in this. So this is going in line with Shittas Tosas. As Tosas says in our sugya, and their masa tartiot plus bay, tartiot plus. So this amount that you read of kabetza that it was mechayev you, he says hainu kabetza b'shir zeh dafka b'pas. The period lav boy sukkah. Periods don't need sukkah at all. Kinamasa period pasa to yuma. The coveted who kachilas are right to pass. Their keva. This is Rava's maskana over there. That there is certain contradictions in the cheshbon over there of what the shiurim are, and what is the shiur chi of sukkah. So the Rava said over there the maskana, the way Tosas learns, and the Rush we'll see is the maskana Gemara there is that perus are pater and sukkah. The reason that that in this the Maisa of Ram Gamliel and Maisa that Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai and Ram Gamliel that they ate that they only were machmar on themselves to eat in the sukkah, but they weren't chayav to eat in the sukkah. Is not because it was a concern of shiur. Wasn't missing mitzad the shiur. It was missing mitzad that it was perus. And perus are pater from sukkah. So that's the main ruach of the Rishonim. The Rush, however, brings, looking inside, the Rush of the Siman Yud Gimel. Here he says this halacha. Kamal chilas aroy amar abaya kadetayim marbe rav ba'al kala. That's the Maskanas Gemara, the amount you grab when you walk into the shiur, before you go to shiur. Basically, a matza kabetza, and that the shiur of you fill up your mouth is talking about a kabetza, like Tosa says. But dafka pas, avo peri lo by sukkah, kedamaskinim per pas to yuma. So the Rush says, like Tosas, that peris is pater. The kavadidu kachilas are right to pass. The kavius, even when you're kaveh yourself on peris, in the best case, when you're mamish kaveya, that's still like a roy of pas. So that's the Tosas and the Rush. But then he brings the Marami Rutenberg, Rabbeinu Meir, hayan nizhar milechol peris chutz l'sukkah. Reb Meir, the Rami Rutenberg was nizhar from eating peris. He would eat peris dafka in the sukkah. Ki haya sover lahachmir ki hayalishna de peri boy sukkah. He was machmir like the shita. The peris do need a sukkah. So we'll take a look for a second at that Gemara. It's the Gemara in Yuma Daf Ayin Tes. The Gemara said over there, it quoted this Mishnah. It says, Tanya la lo mipnei she'alacha kach. The reason that they were machmer, the Rechem and Zakkai and Rabbi Gamliel to eat in the sukkah, not because that was a chiyuv. Ela sheratzu l'hachmer alasman. They only wanted to be machmer on themselves. Because shenasnu lo ritzadek ochel pakos gebetza not lo mapa v'achlu putz sukkah v'lo birchach. And brings ritzadek. The Gemara says, "Kaseves agasa shamri yaserim mikabetza." There was a cheshbon in Hilchos Yom Kippur that a kaseves agasa, that a large dry fig date, that they said is more than a kabetza. Hashnet shtei koslos below garinin love a kabetza kaseves agasa garnei mi have yaserim mikabetza. So it has a kasha that if that amount was pater from sukkah, it must be that must be then two dates without their pits are more than are less than a kabetza. How could it be that then that a kosevas agasa, one dried date with its pit is more than a kabetza? So the answer is yes. It might sound strange, but it's true. And so it comes out that according to this, what they ate in the sukkah, that they were machmer on themselves. According to this cheshbon, it comes out that it was the reason that they were makel Maker Adin, they were only machmar on themselves, but the Maker Adin was mutter, is because the two kosvos that they ate, these two dried dates that they ate, were less than a kabetza. So the reason it's pater is mitzad chisar and shear. But if there would be a shear, it would be chayav. So you see, according to the first lashon of the Gemara, peiros or chayav just like pas. That if you would have a shear kabetza va'od, then peiros also would be chayav. And then Rava was docha that. Rava Amar Hasam Hainu Taima should have a little peri. Well, peri lo by sukkah. There's nothing to do with the shear. It's because be'etz and peiros are pater sukkah. So it comes out that it's a major machlokas between the first lishna of the Gemara and Rava, whether peiros are chayav in sukkah or not. Based on this cheshbon, so the Rosh is quoting Rabbeinu Meir to say that he was machmar like the first lashon, the peri boy sukkah. But the Rosh goes on to say, and the Korban Nesanel understands that Rabbeinu Meir is machmar himself, was machmar over there, even if he was eating achilas haroy of Paris. In other words, he mamish considered completely like pas to the extent that even if you eat it a roy, he would still eat it in the sukkah. So the Rosh on that second point comes to be docha. The Rosh is docha, the second Nakuda of Rabbeinu Meir. Okay, I understand if it's a machmir on Paris, like the first lashon, but why would it be machmir even if it's achilas haroy? He says near it, near the muchach hasam dafila iperi boy sukkah hainu kishkovei atzmo lachilas Paris. The only way that it's muchach from the sugya there, that the only way Paris would be chayav is if you're kaveya your suda, kaveya suda on Paris. It's not just a shear that you need, but you need more. You need a shear of yosem kabetza plus a kviya suda on the Paris. Where does it say? It says muchach from the sugya there, because the Gemara says later on in Yuma in that same sugya meisvei. Amar Rebbe kishayinu lomdim Torah etzel Rebbe Elazar ben Shemua. Rebbe said when we were learning Torah by Rebbe Elazar, "Eviu lefenenu teilim v'anavim v'achalnu achilas haroy chutz l'sukkah." Achilas haroy and achilas kevalo. It's mashma there that achilas keva they wouldn't eat outside the sukkah. Ema achalnu ki achilas haroy chutz l'sukkah. We ate it like achilas haroy chutz l'sukkah, but we boy sema or another shot is achalnu achilas keva v'achalnu pas achilas haroy ba'adayu. They ate them achilas keva, but they ate some pas along with it achilas haroy. So from that Gemara, you see that the only time Paris will be chayav is if you eat the Paris l'chol pachas derech keva as a kviya suda, which means that the ikar suda that you're eating is the suda of Paris. That's what we see from that Gemara. So that's what the Rosh is asking on the Rabbeinu Meir, that why was he machmar on himself by Paris even though he was eating them derech haroy chutz l'sukkah? So you can answer the Maram that actually the Rishonim, I saw this on Achronim in the Shulchan Aruch that they bring down that it's mashma from the beginning of that Gemara the other way, that the kasha of the Gemara initially on Ayin Tesam Aleph in Yuma when it said when the Gemara brought a raya from the Mishnah, hakabetza boy sukkah, said over there that it would be a kabetza. It would the reason that they ate it outside the sukkah, Rabbi Tzadok, is because it was less than a kabetza. If it would be a kabetza, he would have to have it in the sukkah. So from there, the question is, how do you know that would have to need a sukkah? Maybe Rabbi Tzadok was eating it achilas haroy. Maybe he wasn't eating it as a sudas keva. So how do you know that the shear alone would have been mechayav him? So it must be that it's really totally, it's not totally on whether you eat it achilas keva or not. It's really totally just on the shear, and that's why the Gemara had a raya. The Gemara didn't enter into to ask what kind of suda he was eating. The only thing the Gemara dons in the beginning is if there was a shear or not. So it seems to be a steer minei bay within the sugya and Yuma, whether achilas Paris is totally just in the shear, or you need a shear plus achilas keva. So based on that stira, that might be the source of the Ram Rittenberg. There was when it's already machman himself to eat Paris in the sukkah. So lav dafka it had to be an achilas keva, even achilas arai, because of the achilas asugya. The achronim that asked the kasha, they remain with sorachinun. They don't really have a good answer, but that sorachinun might be the source of the machlokas between the Maram Rittenberg and the Rush, whether according to the first lashon, if achilas keva is necessary to be chayav in the first lashon that's chayav Paris in the sukkah, do you need achilas keva or not? Akopanim, that's only the chumrah. The Magen Avraham says, Magen Avraham speaks about this by Richos, could I see it inside, but he says Akopanim, it really doesn't matter. La'alacha, this whole dion is not really the Maisa, because it's only a dion aliba de Ram Rittenberg. But he says, we pass like the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't even mention the shita of the Ram Rittenberg as a chumrah. He just says, stam, the Shulchan Aruch, that Paris or Pater and Sukkah, and the Ramah adds in a filu kava alayu. In other words, even if you have that kfiyus, a kfiyus suda on Paris, because like Tosus and the Rush say, is the kfiyus of Paris is like a chilas arai of pas. So there's no way to be mechayev yourself in Sukkah halach and ma'isa. Magen Avraham, though, interestingly, does point out, though, the nafkamina will be in a different case, not for Paris that we say is patra legamre, but it'll be a nafkamina, this dion of how we understand over here, whether you need keva or not, by something which is not pas, to bring it to the next level. The nafkamina will be pas ababakistin. The pas ababakistin, do you need a dafka derech chiyuv, derech keva? You have to be kaveh suda on it to be chayav, or is it enough just to eat a shear of kabetz of od to be chayav? Is it just tali in the shiurim, or is it tali in the kfiyus to bring the pas ababakistin cake? You're eating cake by itself as not part of the suda. If that's mechayev in a sukkah or not, Magen Avraham says it's really totally in these two studim. According to the tzad, the way that the Ram Rittenberg learns the sugya, that it's totally only in the shear and not in the kfiyus. You don't need a kfiyus for that. So Mela, according to Ram Rittenberg, if you eat mezonos of a yoser mikabetza, is already chayav in a sukkah. But according to the Rush and Tosfos and most Rishonim, the other Rishonim that they learned the sugya of Paris, the only way Paris can be chayav even with the shear is only if you're kovea atzmai alayim. Then also pasav abakistim, which takes to the next level. That's what's similar to Paris in the sugya, but the way we hold actually as a chiyuv, pasav abakistim, then you need these two, all these like tartila tibusa, you'll need to be chayav also as well. You'll need a shear, which is the kabetz of od, and you need kaviyah suda to be kovea atzmai alayim. That'll be the nafkamina. So the Magen Avraham himself comes out because of the Maram to be machmir, that if you have just Yosef Kabetza, that's enough to be chayiv in sukkah. You have to make a bracha. And in fact, it's a major machlokas poskim in the Shari Tshuva here on the spot. And Oshei, so he brings down the Guinness Radim. Guinness Radim is Shals and Tshuvas of the Prima Gadim, the author of the Prima Gadim. So he says, in the name of the Guinness Radim, the Pas Kishnin Yesh Lach Shivo Kapas Gomer Linyan Zeh. Daf Shioch Lenu Derek Aroy, Kevin Shakal Kashir Yosef Mikabetza Yivarach al Sukkah. So according to the Guinness Radim, even if you don't eat a derech kava, you're not mamish kaviyah suda, you just ate kazayas od, you're chayav in a bracha. It's chayav in a sukkah mamish, and you're chayav in a bracha. Then he brings afterwards the machzik bracha. It's all abbreviations here. Mem ches beis. That's machzik bracha, which is the author of the Chidah. This which is during the time of the Guinness Radim. Chidah, one of the Gedolei Sfardim. Kasav. Shekasav Tshuva Ledasa Chokim Al Rambam Sark Pas Mamish Yosef Mikabetza. The only time that the shear of Yosef Mikabetza is Mechayev in a sukkah is Mamish Pas. About Pas Abba Kisnin, a few Achal Yosef Mikabetza Havika Aroy the Pas Achiyikva Sudas Aleim. The Pas Abba Kisnin cake is not like Pas, or we'll say cake is Pasnish. It's not Pas. Or you say it doesn't pass, whatever you want to say it. It's to be have the same chiyuv as pas. You have to be dafka kaveh suda land. So it's very interesting that they just say this on their own. Man, I didn't see them inside the Guinness Vadim and the Maxim Bracha. I'd like to see them inside, but it seems obvious based on the way the Magen Avram learns Machlokas and Ram Rittenberg and the Rush that these two, this Machlokas Achronim, the Guinness Vadim and the Maxim Bracha, is totally in the two shitas in the Rush. Other than Pshat and the Sugya, like the Magen Avram said, the nafkamina won't be for Paris because we don't pass like the Maram, but the nafkamina will be pasul abakistim if a Yosem Mikabetza is already chayav or not. So the Shari Tshuva ends off saying that in his Medina Seinu, it's very common to, like we do today, you make people and make kiddush. You go to the kiddush and shul and you eat some mazonas, pasul abakistim, makom suda. You don't say kiddush and makom suda that way, and then you go afterwards and take a walk, whatever he says, and finally you go home and eat. There's a few more hours till you eat the Suda. So in that case, when you're starting off your Sudas Yom Tov or Suda Shabbos with Kiddush on Mazonas, you're not eating, enormous amounts. He says there that Mavarchim Mishas Kiddush Birch Sukkah. The minig of people is to make a Birch Sukkah when they eat the Mazonas, so you make Kiddush in the Sukkah. And he says, near the Shapir Dummy, that's proper to do that. Even though it's a possible kistin, he says important lashon. The kiddush, since you're eating this possible kistin, you're eating this cake now for the sake of to have kiddush makam suda. So by definition, you're being kaveya enough of the suda to be kiddush makam suda. So that's a kviyus. That's kavalayu. That's the halacha is telling you kavalayu. Shapir dami shivar perk sukkah. That machshava, you're turning this mazonas into kiddush makam suda, then that machshava turns it into a sudas keva. That's considered keva legabi the din of kava alayu to be chayav in sukkah and make a birka sukkah. It just says you have to be careful to make sure that you're eating yosem mikabetza, not just to have a little bite or even a kazayas, to eat yosem mikabetza to make sure that yotzei. Then, in that case, even the Maxli Bracha is moida. He holds that the whole machlokas Guinness Rada and Maxli Bracha Yosef Kabetza Stam just during the week. But the Maxli Bracha will be moida. If that same Kabetza Va'od will be in a sukkah the Shem Kiddush, he'll agree you can make a bracha. That's the Kuli Amal. He says just during a weekday or in the middle of Yom Tov, where you're not being Kabetza Suda, you're just eating. You want to snack on Shabbos. So then that goes back to the machlokas between the Guinness Rada and the Maxli Bracha. The Mishnah Brura in that case says that he's machriya that you could make a bracha, but you should make the bracha, but also sit there a little while l'shem yeshiva sukkah. To mitzaref you're sitting l'shem yeshiva sukkah, so then that turns the combination of eating something. You don't just walk in, eat, and walk out. So the only reason you're walking in is l'shem achila. Eat and then as we say in Texas, stay a while, stick around a while. Eat something and. Don't run out. Stay a little while. As we'll see later on, Mishnah Berurah doesn't speak this out lahedya, but it's possible also that you can mitzaref over here the shitas Rif and the Rambam, which is also the shitas Gra, the halacha, that every time you walk into a sukkah, even if you don't do anything, you make a bracha. You can walk in even 100 times during the day, and we're compared to tefillin. Every time you take your tefillin off and on, if there's a hefsek in between, as long as there's a hefsek in between. But if there's a hefsek, then every time you walk in, even 100 times, not l'shem achila, you make a bracha. So we paskin like Rabbeinu Tam. We'll see this later on. We paskin like Rabbeinu Tam that you're only chayav, and we only make a bracha when you b'shas achila. We say that all the rest of the yeshivas are all mitzurah back to the achila. The ikr is the achila. And so this copy that we'll have to, Mr. Shem will see later on when we get to that sugya. Hopefully we'll get there this one. That a shaila, whether it means Rabbeinu Tam means that ikr yeshiva sukkah is dafka achila, or yeshiva sukkah is even walking in as well. But it's just the gabi hilchos brachas. Hilchos brachas they were only kaveya by a davar kavua like achila. So mitzad the bracha, it's all mitzurah back to the achila. That's a shaila we'll see later on. That goes back to the definition, a very deep question of what is the overall mechayev of yeshiva sukkah. Is it achila or is it taka? Every time you walk in, you kind of shiva sukkah. But anyway, you have it sirif of the, even though we're going to pass them that way, we like the riff in the Rambam, you walk in every time. We call makom as it's sirif to over here. You're eating yosef b'kabetza, and so you want to be in the sukkah, and then you also some Rishonim were saying according to the Ram Rud you're already chayav, and that's the shock of the Guinness Rudim. So Maksud Brachas cholak on that. But Lamaisa, if you sit a little while, also, so then you also gain the Shitas of Rambam and the Rif that you're in there l'shem yeshiva sukkah, and you're turning the whole thing, like Mr. Bruce says, into a one big kain taduru. Then you can make a bracha l'kuli alma as well. At least we're not worried then about a seven brachas. Okay. But okay, moving on. Well, now what the Rush says, and also in the Shulchan Aruch, the lesson of Shulchan Aruch is mutar lishtos mayim v'yayin v'lechol peros chutz l'sukkah. So the Rishonim actually learn yayin from peros. They say the yayin is really no different than peros. It's just another pre. It has an malusa of yayin, but Lamaisa it's nothing more than peros. So the Mishnah Berurah in this Yud Gimel, he says that what the Ramah says, Masha Hegia Ramah, Vafilu Kava Alayu, those words Vafilu Kava Alayu that are putter is going back on the whole sentence. So it's going on Mutar Lishtos Mayim V'Yayin Lechol Peros. So that Kava Alayu is not just Peros, but it's also going back on Yayin. Even if you're Kaveh yourself on Yayin still, you're also putter. He says, and the reason is because yayin is no better than achilas peros. But he brings however, the kama achronim there are many achronim. He brings a list of achronim over here: the Bach, Lavush, the Prisha, Eli Rabba, are all cholak on this. They say that in shosa yayin b'kfius chaya b'sukkah. Ufrat b'nei chabura shekava l'shtos yayin vada have a keva gomer. If one person, they hold that even one person sits in your kaveh yourself, you're having to sit down, you go out to the sukkah, and you just want to sit down there and have wine and cheese, whatever, you're kaveh yourself to drink wine. In Koshaken, if you're together with chaverim, that you all sit down, you're having a wine and cheese event in your sukkah. So you're kaveh to sit down with everyone together, and he doesn't even add in the cheese. I'm adding in the cheese, but you're kaveh yourself to let's sit down and let's come and sit and drink wine together. You take out a few bottles of wine, you sit down and drink. So these are Achronim hold that's mamish considered a achilas keva. That's considered your kaveh yourself. So it becomes a little bit of a problem. So he says that for sure to do it outside the sukkah, he says for sure should be asar. But the guy be making a bracha. Some brachas, many poskim would say you can't say Elisha B'Sukkah unless you're having uzonos with it. So the optimal thing to do if you're going to be sitting and drinking wine like that would be to at least have a kabetza v'yoser of uzonos along with it. Then you can make it the kuliyama. You can certainly make a bracha the kuliyama. Now, when it comes to possible b'kishnin, so we mentioned that already, that machlokas. Another nakuda of that is that there's a shaila gabe bracha. I heard from Shlomo Zalman, he writes this in a few places as well. I heard it from him also directly that by him it was pashut that when you do make a leishu sukkah mazonas, you cover yourself. Let's say you have a Yosef Kabetza and you sit a little bit to be Yosef, also all the other shittas. The Maisa, the Machzik bracha held you still don't make a bracha, but Mishnah Berurah has tzirufim over here that if you eat Yosef Kabetza, you sit down, you kaveh yourself, and you sit a little bit, then you make a bracha. So Shlomo Zalman held that when you make that bracha, the order should be there's a shalom pasuk, but the order should be first leisha b'sukkah and then mazonos. The minhag olam seems to be not that way. But Shlomo said that the minhag might have the way, but it's held as a minhag shtus. Why? It for sure should be that way. Because since, here's a svara, since it's a machlokes, like we just mentioned, machzik bracha and Laginas Radim, whether they make this bracha or not, so if we're being machmer to make it, but since according to the machzik bracha you shouldn't make it, so it becomes the shaila of hefsek to make the mazonos and make a leisha sukkah that you're not chayav in. Some poskim hold you're putter in that bracha, so that bracha becomes a hefsek. It's not if you in a case where you're for sure chayav in a sukkah, you're eating bread, you're sitting down, you make a motzi, sudas yamtiv, for sure we make a motzi, and then leisha sukkah. Why? Why is it not a hefsek between the motzi and the pas? Because the sukkah is a matir to be able to eat that pas. So the seder is hamotzi and then leisha sukkah. The sukkah is without the sukkah you can't eat that pas. So it's not a hefsek. But if you would pater making it, you're not really chayv in a sukkah, but you stop make a leisha sukkah. I don't know. I stop make a bracha. I say motzi lechem and aretz, and then I make an asher yatzar. Because I went to the bathroom before, and then I make a motzi. That's a hefsek between the hamotzi. I have to make a new hamotzi. Somebody you could have a new Baal Tshuva doesn't know that you have to let him know if you have an asher yatzar, do it after the motzi or before the Ntil Sinayim, not in the middle. Al kapanim. Truth is, you could make it after Ntil Sinayim. Well, that's another story. But just not after the hamotzi. But Shlomo Zalman held that since there are shittas that hold that leisha sukkah is not necessary because you're pater really from eating this mazonos in the sukkah. So we're machmer to do it, but don't be machmer in a way that you're creating a hefsek between your hamotzi, your mazonos and the eating, according to the machzik bracha.
But according to the Mishnah Berurah, who says you should sit down afterwards, then you wouldn't have to do that order.
It's also a tziruf to be able to make the bracha. That it won't be choshesh for bracha levatala, but it's still against the machzik bracha. He's not saying that he's maskin. Machzik bracha is maskin. It's just that's enough. We have enough reason to go ahead and make a bracha. But there still is a machlokes of poskim that remains. It's only that the Shari Tshuva said that the machzik bracha will be maskin by sudas, but if you're doing it the same kiddush, so then he'll be masking then it is a real kviyas. But when it's not a real kviyas, you're just having a snack in the sukkah, even if you're sitting a little bit. Without sitting a little bit, Shlomo Zalman had held not to make the bracha because then you're putting yourself right in the middle of the machos of poskim. So to sit a little bit as nocha knech, as another prat, another nakuda, another tziruf to be make the bracha, but it still remains not a bracha according to the machzik bracha. So why put yourself into to another chash of hefsek when for sure the mazonos is not a hefsek between leisha sukkah and the eating. Leisha sukkah is going on the entire totality of the sitting there, so that's for sure not a hefsek. That's what he held. I don't think the minhag olam is so much that way, and I mentioned that to him, and he was very. It's interesting. Shlomo Zalman was very, very strong about mekayim minhag olam. He would always go very much out of his way to, even if there was a strange minhag, to find some kind of a smach for the minhag olam, because the olam doesn't do things stam. But here, when I said that to him, minhag olam is not that way. He right away fired back at me. It's a minhag shtus. So, so I'm not asking for anybody. You're welcome to ask your local neighborhood rabbi. Okay, now the Shulchan Aruch says in Davar Pashat that Mayim Chutz Sukkah is pater. Mayim Chutz Sukkah. However, once out of Maisa, I learned by Sikur Shalevsky and Eretz Yisrael for a number of years and many years, and then afterwards I came back for Simchus Deis Shoeva, and there was a whole big oil there from Gateshead, and there was anything that came up. It was unbelievable the way the explosions of learning that went on from all the Gateshead guys. So I remember in the middle of the circle, dancing around Simchus Deis Shoeva, somebody threw out a shaila that if you're in the middle of a suda in the sukkah, and let's say you go out to the kitchen to do something and you want to drink, you get real thirsty in the middle of the suda, you want to drink a drink of water. Mime is pater chutz sukkah, but what about mime in the middle of the suda? Is that water now just water, or is that considered a chelik of the suda, and it needs to be in the sukkah? So it became a huge. I remember going around that circle and everyone screaming at each other in the circle. We're trying to dance and scream at the same time. And later on, I saw that it's actually Mefurish Sha'ar Tzion. The Sha'ar Tzion by us here in Os Chav Tes. He says, "V'hada Isa b'Gemara, Ochel v'Shosim b'Sukkah." Why does it say? What's the lashon of the Gemara? Ochel v'Shosim b'Sukkah. You drink in the sukkah as well. If drinking is pater, we're saying water and yain don't need to be in the sukkah. That's the Shulchan Aruch. So what do you do with the lashon of Gemara? Ochel v'Shosim b'Sukkah. It says shosim. Hetik lashon zeh b'reisha sif. The very same sif, right? The very same sif where it says wine and yain is pater. The first words of the sif are ochel v'Shosim b'shem b'Sukkah. So what's shosim? What's shtia is m'chayav b'Sukkah? So the Sha'ar Tzion says, when you're in the middle of eating, and now you get thirsty, and it's the derech to eat and drink as part of your suda, they're in poskim the hold that you can't bench until you drink. Because if you're still a little thirsty, then the suda it's felt, it's missing in the drinking. So the drinking is mamshach chelik of the suda. It says, that shtia is nichlal in the suda. So they bring down here in the dirshu that's only going to be water that you're drinking machmas suda, but it's machmas achila that you're drinking. If stam, let's say you're done with the whole suda, you stam feel like drinking, you didn't bench yet, then that might still be qualified as shtia chutz l'suda and which are chutz l'sukkah. But that drinking, which is that's maybe ochel v'shosim. Maybe that's why the lashon of the Gemara and lashon of Shulchan Aruch is ochel v'shosim. When you eat and drink, which is like part of the same togetherness of the normal way people eat a suda is achila v'shtia. You drink together with your eating, so that shtia is chayav to be in the sukkah. That's very good shema. So, machriya our explosion in the circle of the simple Beis Rebbe. Back many years. One last thing to talk about quickly is Shena. Shena, sleeping in the sukkah, is actually more chamor than achila b'sukkah, because we know that this whole halacha is telling us that achilas harai is worth the chutz sukkah, but Shena harai is also chutz sukkah. So it's not really. I mean, in Be'etzim it comes out that there's no dinner roi by Shena, ain't a roi by Shena, because the Gemara says that even a little bit of Shena often is enough. Just put your head down on the table, sleep for a few minutes, have a quick power nap for a few minutes, as long as it's long enough to walk 100 amos, which is not very long, a minute or so. And sometimes that's enough to wake up and you're able to go and learn in the next few hours because you have enough Shena. So Shena Betzim comes out to be a lot more chamor than Achila. However, the Darkei Moshe in Os Gimel by us here, Darkei Moshe on the tour from the Ramah. So he brings down the Mordechai, Perka Yashin Kasav. It's interesting, it's Perka Yashin, right? Kasav Aval, Olam Samuchu al Devar Zeh, Shireim Min Atzina, Avakachola Shem Basakana. Because of the cold, it's hard to identify with that in Dallas. People get air conditioners, space air conditioners in Dallas to try to ward off some of the terrible heat that there was in the sukkah. But in the other parts of the world, I remember being in sukkahs in Chicago wearing winter coats, fending off the snow. I once gave a shiur, and when I first came to Dallas, I gave it a shiur in Hilchos Sukkah. I started off with the halacha, Shail and Poskim, if the schach is totally covered by snow, is it still kosher or not while the snow's there? So someone started something very Nagil and Isa in Dallas. So anyway, he says over here that the Olam is somech, the Mordechai is somech on that they're afraid of the cold. It's so cold that they're considered like a chol hashem b'sakana, which is pater in a sukkah, or it's so cold that they have a din mitztayr. Mitztayr is also pater in a sukkah. And the Ramah says that maybe the minhag was pasha from there, that many people are makel to sleep in the sukkah, that he says, even though the time is enomaspik, because most places it's not that cold, that if you put pillows and blankets and everything, you would be able to sleep out there. You could warm yourself up enough to be able to handle the cold if you try. But so the Ramah himself is machadash that li nira shenogol lahakal ki mitzvah sukkah leishin ba kamoshi yeshin bebesa ishim ishtay. It's supposed to be came to Deru, which is a man sleeping together with his wife. That's the normal way that you live all year. And that's nichol of the din of teshu came to Deru. So the Ramah goes on to say that since it's, and also there's another raya that Kol Yisrael Yotzim Sukkah Achas from Ezrach. So there's no way that Kol Yisrael are going to be sleeping there with their wives. So he says, if they leave the wives at home, so then that can be mitzvah, and that's to be mitzvah is not came to do. And he brings it more in Erevin that it's considered like making your wife like she's divorced almost, or if she sleeps away from her husband. Then he ends off. But if you're able to be sameach with his wife and still sleep out there, then for sure that's best. This is very important. He brings a raya for the Gemara and beginning of Erchin. The Hedyad, it says explicitly that Makom Shlo Yuchal Liyos in Ishto Lo Mikri came to do Upatim in Sukkah. There, the Gemara is talking about the Kohanim. The Gemara says that Hakol Chayavim B'Sukkah, and among those who are Chayavim, it says Kohanim and Levim. The Gemara says Shita, why shouldn't Kohanim be Chayav? So the Gemara says that since they went at the Beis Hamikdash, they go for the Mishmaros for a week at a time. They go a couple times a year. If that comes out of beyond Sukkot, so they're going to be there without their wives, and it's missing Kain to Duru. Kamash Malan, they're still Chayav. So what's that Kamash Malan? The Havamina was that it's missing Kain to Duru because it's missing their wife. So that's the raya to their ma. The problem is the Kamash Malan is not that way. The Kamash Malan is Fakir. So it's a raya. They're still Chayav even though the wives are not there. So of course, it's a raya connected to their ma. But you could say, and it's mashma from there, Taka, that the reason that they're Chayav is a little bit mashma like Tosis, there's some Tosis over there, that the reason they're Chayav anyway, what's the Kamash Malan? Kamash Malan is not that there's no such tour of Kain to Duru. Kamash Malan is, the Lashon Gemara is that Kamash Malan, since that's their norm, that's the norm of the Kohanim, that they go there twice a year, it's been Ish Mishmarot. They had to be in the Beis Mikdash twice a year and they can't be with their wives. So that became their Kain to Duru, that they do that both in Kavua. So then if that falls out to be on Sukkot, then there's no problem of Kain to Duru, because that is their Kain to Duru. They do normally live without their wives for a week when they do their Mishmaros. So that would be a Geshmaka Raya to the Ramah, that by a regular person that doesn't have a excuse to be sleeping away from his wife, then there is a P'tur of Kain to Duru. That's not the normal way of living. The only problem is that the Gemara seems to say that's directly because of Kain to Duru, not because of Mitzvah. The Ramah over here added in the word, which seems to, called Mosif Kareya, and it seems to be, then makes it connected to the Gemara. Sometimes it's missed. So it seems to be that the reason is it's not Kain to Duru is because of Mitzvah. And the Gemara over there is just saying, no, it's nothing to do with Mitzvah, it's just because it's not the normal way to live. So that's a kasha on the Ramah. But the Ma'aser Ramah in Shulchan Aruch, when he quotes this, he doesn't add in the words Mitzvah. And maybe it's possible to even to be dochak in the Darchei Moshe that he means two separate things, not one thing. He means maybe it's a separate thing. Maybe lo mikra kain to do is not mitzvah. Mitzvah also actually is pater kezav kain to do, but it's a different p'tur than just a direct in kain to do, not normal way to live. And that we know that we already saw in previous sugya, that's subjective. We spoke about the Machos Abaye Barava by Shomer Ginus Upardesin, that we said that Abaye said your pater because of Kain to Duru, because they can't bring their normal normal blankets and pillows out to the field where they put their sukkah when they're shomer ginos. And Abaya said same to do, and Rava said no, another reason, because Pirza Kar Laganav. So why did Rava go away from the time of Abaya? Tosa says that you can't be cholakan, it's a brisa that came to do it. So there the Ran said that since Rava holds that since that's the normal way that this guy lives, he's a shomer ginos radesing, he's always living out there without the average pillows and things that are pillows and blankets and everything. He knows how to rough it. He just goes to the sleeping bag. He roughs it all the time. So his Ketaduru is without it. And therefore he has to come up with a new time to be called. So you see clearly from Nakamura, from Rava, the Ketaduru is, you don't go by the average person, it's a subjective thing. It's very subjective. And therefore here also, it'll be subjective whether sleeping without his wife is Ketaduru or not. Some people might say that the mitzvah is the other way. They're less mitzvah. They have a little bit of a break. Hopefully, then they need different work to be done than sukkah work. Anyway, but the Ramah over here in Shulchan Aruch, he says the same halacha, and he just says it's not going to do. He doesn't mention mitzvah at all. If anything, fakir, the Mishnah Berurah brings down from the Bir Agra and the Magen Avram that they're cholik on the Ramah, on the time of the Ramah. The Gra holds it's not enough to be to pater because of Ketaduru. And they say unless Ketaduru wouldn't pater you, unless you're mitzvah. If you're mitzvah to be away from her, so then that would be a p'tur. So the Gra and the Magen Avram are learning that the Ramah is dafka not going mitzvah, is going directly because of Ketaduru, and they're the ones that are adding in mitzvah. So it's just very interesting that the Darkei Moshe did say that, but he left that out in the Ramah, and the other poskim are putting it back in. It's very interesting. So halacha l'maisa, we're not really samach on this so much, unless wife's going to really be upset. Even Shana Rishona, some want to say it's a p'tur of the whole Shana Rishona because it says the Sima Chasishto Shana Achas. And one of the ways your Sima Chasishto is by sleeping together in the same place with her. She shouldn't feel alone. Rishon Zalman didn't want to accept that so much. He wanted to say only during Shabbat brachas. You can't like get married and then be out. Okay, so long. It's been nice knowing you, and go out to the sukkah. So if you got married right before sukkah, then during the Shabbat brachas week, you should not sleep in the sukkah. But past that, he holds you should. So I know Chabad is not that way. Pardon?
She can be mochel on it. You're saying?
Yeah, she can be mochel. Yeah.
So she can be mochel on the Simach Esishto.
Yeah, that's me. She could be mochel on that. Yeah, she could be mochel on that. But you don't want to get her to be mochel because maybe she'll just do it because she doesn't want to be a bad sport, but you won't. So called Sophie, you'll be vatal Simach Esishto. But there are poskim that hold that applies the whole year. Some Hantika poskim say that since it's a mitzvah Simach Esishto Shana Achas, it's the whole year. Then you're talking plutzer all year. That'll be no different than the p'tur from the army to have to go out to to the whole Shana Achas, your plutzer from going out. The Torah actually repeats that. The Torah in the first place were brought down and brought all the p'turim, and one of them was Shana Achas, and then later on, Parashat Kitetse, it repeated again the p'tur, only the Gabi that one, not only the Simul Chazishto, and not the other p'turim. So it's just interesting that the Torah is modulated that twice, that p'tur from the Melchama, from if you're Toch Shana Achas. So based on that, some posts can hold that that's also a p'tur for a sukkah. But if we can, we should try to sameach your wife the best you can, and if the way to sleep in the sukkah, then we see that for Kirit, the shein of a sukkah is more chamer. We see less people do it, but even though it's more chamer than achila, because there's no heter of achilas aroi. What is the smachta of Chabad to not sleep in the sukkah? You know what that is?
Yeah, so that's based on the idea that it's on mitzvah from the Inyan that there's such a holiness, makif and dabina, in the sukkah. So it's the Inyan of mitzvah is that we don't feel that's for people who feel that level. Okay, so but what if you don't feel that intense holiness? So then what's the heter for that? So it's the Inyan that you're a mitzvah that you don't feel it.
You would start with you don't feel it.
Yeah. I'll have to give you the Maramokan for that.
Interesting.
I'll let you have it.
Okay, we can argue about that later.
In our sleep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet dreams. Okay.
Okay, so it should be we're already late. Wow. Okay. All right, so we'll Mr. Shem see each other next week and have a good Shabbos and good Slichos week.
Yeah, I mean,
Have a good Shabbos.
Call to-
very good.